Welcome, everyone, to this special edition of Monday Match Analysis. It is your 2024 Wimbledon Power Rankings. This time, I will not do it solo. I will bring on a friend of the program, Alex Gruskin of Cracked Racquets, host of the Mini Break podcast, among others, editor-in-chief for Cracked Racquets. We will start with the players who we didn't quite get in our top 10, and then we'll slowly work our way up from that 10 to 7 range into that 7 to 4 range, and then we'll talk about our 3 to 1 range at the very end. Pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go any further than that, but I do want to remind you before we get started about the draw. It is my newsletter that curates the best tennis content on the internet every single week, delivered to your inbox every Tuesday morning, which was this morning. And the big one this week was Nick Kyrgios. His hometown newspaper published a bombshell exclusive that went in depth on what Nick has been up to in the last year, his injury, his comeback, his mentality as we stand right now. It was in the Canberra Times, plus a really interesting piece about one reason why Halle might get a better field than Queens. Way back, if you go back, 15, 20 years, it didn't used to be like that. Queens would get the better fields. That has kind of changed. There's a surprising reason why that might be that. And so much more is in the draw this week. You can subscribe with the link in the description, or you can go to thedraw.tennis. Without further ado, here is Alex Gruskin. All right, Wimbledon Power Rankings. I do it a little bit differently because for RG, there's this massive lead up. You're tracking form, you're tracking results, you're seeing how the players are kind of moving around in the power rankings. And that part of it is really fun. For Wimbledon, it's absolutely useless to do that exercise. So we come in, and week before Wimbledon, we do the power rankings, and I wanted you to be a part of it. I do it solo all the time because I just think it's more subjective and more opinionated with Wimbledon, where you have tiny sample sizes, both historically, both for this year. So I feel like reasonably you can land in very different places here. And that's why I wanted to compare notes with someone like yourself.
Well, I like that designation. It's not objective, it's subjective. So let's turn to the man with all the opinions who will have thoughts no matter what. And look, certainly your listeners, I think, know I am subjective. And by the way, it's always great to be back in front of them because I think you do have the best comment section in all of tennis media. Certainly agree with your opening analysis there. It's really hard to try and make any quantitative points as it relates to grass court tennis because most of these top players have fewer than 50. Certainly you start to get to the Alcaraz and Sinners of the world. They start to float in the 30 or fewer grass court matches to this point. To try and make quantitative analyses is really difficult to do. Go look at the Tennis Abstract grass court specific ELO ratings. They get really funky just because some players have a grass court resume, others really don't. And so I agree with you. I've been saying it on the show this week. Rather than turn to the quantitative metrics, you have to go qualitative, which in the case of tennis is often the eye test. Who looks good? Whose game makes sense on this surface? You will see a lot of that reasoning throughout the course of my list.
Quick note on Grassy Low. I was looking at that earlier.
Yeah. Oh.
Two things stood out to me. One, Milos Raonic, who was not granted a wild card into the event despite asking for one, and therefore will not be playing Wimbledon at all, not even in qualies, would be the 24 seed if Wimbledon went by ELO. The other one that stood out was Casper Ruud.
Yeah, nowhere to be
30
seen.
seed. 30 seed.
Exactly. Yeah. No, if you go by grass court raw ELO, which is because grass court ELO, it factors your other results. And, again, a guy like Casper Ruud is
which it
30
should.
And not 300th. Exactly. Because he's still Casper freaking Ruud. And there's just a baseline of tennis he's going to bring. If you go real hipster and just go grass court raw, which is something I like to do because, I get hipster from time to time. Sasha Bublik is 6th on the grass court raw ELO ratings. And now we're talking. That would be, again, game-wise, it makes sense. He's higher on a grass court than other surfaces. 6th on any list for Sasha Bublik, far too high. But it speaks to the heavy variance we see on this surface, certainly.
That said, I always like to throw out this disclaimer. I'm going to do it here. I'm not
Hey,
holding you to this,
no, hold
but
me to the same rules.
okay. I mean, if you wish, what I always say to my audience as a reminder is that my power rankings
Mhm,
are more evidence based and my
mhm,
predictions might be more speculative. They might be more gut feeling, more future casting, right? Predictions are future casting. But for the power rankings, I do try to keep it very, very reasonable. And that means that there can be some variance between what my opinion is and what the power rankings end up being. All right. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
May I comment on the
Go ahead.
disclaimer? I
Uh-huh.
apologize because I have been justifiably accused in the past of being a contrarian just to go the opposite way from you. And sometimes I do that just to keep things spicy. In this instance, I do it for a purpose and I go the completely opposite way. For me, the power rankings are about dreaming of what might happen, about, hey, here's what form has looked like coming in. Here's what the grass court resume says as well. And by the way, the third piece I've thrown to power rankings, where are you in your career? Is there a scenario where this Wimbledon just happens to be that moment where things line up perfectly and that breakout run, which we knew you were capable of but haven't had yet, that breakout run emerges for a player. The other side, when I make predictions, you have the draw in front of you. Like, I think that gets a little bit more evidence based for me. But maybe that contrast in thought style will make this exercise that much more interesting.
No, yeah. I'm glad you said that. I'm totally good with that. And for me, yeah, the predictions will usually, unless the draw stuff gets in the way, tell you
Sure.
where I stand on things a little bit more than the power rankings. It's going to be fascinating to see where we land on this stuff. Okay, we're going to do a top 10, but as
Mhm.
always, there is also a next out. First question I want to ask you, who among the players who you didn't put in the top 10 were you most on the fence about? You almost put them in, you
Mm.
couldn't quite get there. Who's that guy who just missed the cut?
I have three names for me that stick out in the honorable mention, and I considered 16 total guys for my list of the top 10, but I did have an honorable mention section, and the number one name on that, well, honestly, I'd put them all in the same sort of tier.
Sure.
Grigor Dimitrov, Tommy Paul, and Taylor Fritz. Three guys who just missed out on my top 10. And it's because with my 9 and 10 spot, I decided, and even with 8, I did a little bit more speculating. I did a little bit more dreaming, and we'll get into who those are and what those dreams look like in a moment. But look, Grigor's played top 12 ball, certainly I would argue maybe even top 8 ball for 12 months consecutively, dating back to the start of last year's grass court season. And in a world where Djokovic is injured, where, yeah, Alcaraz is the reigning Wimbledon champ, has still played fewer than 25 career matches on the surface. Sinner clearly gets better on it with every passing year. Still, maybe not serious best of 5 doubts, but just like a little lingering doubt in the back. There is no clear cut number one favorite entering this Wimbledon. And that's why you really can't write off anyone. And a guy like a Dimitrov, a guy like a Tommy Paul, who we know in one match can be as good as anyone. It's can he do it for 7? You know, Taylor Fritz is going to stumble his way to the quarterfinals and probably lose in straight sets to a Djokovic type top seed. Like, to get to the finals, you have to be in the ball game. And to me, those are three guys who will be in the ball game.
I have two of those three guys in my top 10. I have
Really?
Dimitrov. Yeah, I have
Okay.
Dimitrov in there and I have Tommy Paul in there. So let's cover that, I guess, right off the bat.
Okay.
I put Tommy Paul in. He's got no bad losses since the Australian Open. He's 22 and 10 on grass since 2021. I like how dominant he was in Queens. You know, only
Mhm,
Draper gave him a match,
mhm,
and Draper is a bad matchup. He was able to get through it. He did have the physical advantage there. I guess the big thing with me for Tommy, I also like, his game on grass. I think it translates well. But my big thing here is I look at his season with the injury interrupting it and it getting off to a slow start in Australia. If you kind of take away January and look at what he's done, every single week it's been impressive. He's made slam runs in the past, so I've seen it before. And
mhm.
that's why he sneaks into my number 10 spot. Then for Dimitrov, he's 8 for me. And in theory, I almost wanted to have him higher. The reason I didn't have him higher is because I don't have Wimbledon results and I don't have slam results. Do you know what's crazy, Grusk? Dimitrov has played Wimbledon 13 times. He's made the second week 3 times.
Yeah.
And Roland Garros was his first slam quarterfinal since the Australian Open in 2021. That's 12 majors in a row where he didn't make a quarterfinal. The Nuno Borges loss was kind of a disaster this year, given his results outside of that. But, he's got so many great fast court runs, low bouncing condition runs in the last 6 months. That's why I wanted to have him higher, because his serve and forehand have looked so good. Anyway, so those two got in the top 10 for me. And Taylor Fritz, I agree with your assessment with Taylor.
So my guys ranked 8 through 13, and we'll get to 8 through 10 obviously here in a second, but they're all in the same tier to me, of tier 3 of, look, do I think you're going to win the tournament? Probably not. Second week runs are in your future. Like, you could win a match, maybe even 2 in that second week, and make a serious push. And, people may forget, but Tommy Paul's breakout came 2022 grass court season, right? It was the start when he made that round of 16 in Wimbledon. And from there, everything just kind of fell into place. I actually thought the reason he won that Draper matchup is how well Tommy happened to match up with Jack. And in particular, Jack wants to hit the slice serve wide on the ad side, move forward behind it, or just use it to set up the +1. You can't do that against Tommy's backhand. He just took that away so well, I thought, throughout the course of the match, Gill. And, again, Tommy's fluid as a mover. He's comfortable as a volleyer. He can do a little bit of everything, really well-rounded. I have no issues with him being in your top 10. He has been that good. I think right now he's like 8th, tied for 8th in total wins in this 2024 season, and that includes a chunk with an injury he had to deal with. Tommy's been excellent. Grigor's 6th in total wins here in the 2024 season. I agree with you. I had the Wimbledon results for him, is why I just happened to leave him out. It's a better version of the Tsitsipas issue where, look, the backhand return is a struggle. Over 3 out of 5 sets on grass courts. You know what he's going to be picked on. But I have no issues with those guys cracking your list. They're just on the outside looking in.
All right, well, let's see if I have anyone out that you have in now. So my next 4 out is Jan-Lennard Struff, who is 9-3 on grass in the last 2 years. And his only loss in the lead up this year is a 3rd set tiebreak to Sinner. So that is awesome. Awful record at Wimbledon, 5-9 lifetime at Wimbledon, which is crazy to me. It feels unsustainable to me. I hope that he has a little bit of a run here, because I think he's too good of a player not to, but I left him out. Draper, best grass season he could possibly have, winning Stuttgart, beating Alcaraz and Queens. But for me, my opinion, I can't change my opinion that much in 2 weeks. And I always try to stop myself when I'm about to put someone like Jack Draper in the Wimbledon power rankings after 2 weeks, because it's too drastic a change for me. And that's why I shied away. Korda is also in my last 4. Really, really great grass lead-in where he went Hertogenbosch, Queens, final, semifinal, beat Dimitrov, beat Paul. So that's 2 guys I have in my top 10. But he hasn't made the second week of a major since the Australian Open quarterfinal at the start of last year. Hasn't made the second week, meaning hasn't made the 4th round in many, many majors since the first of last year. And then last in my next 4 out is Andrey Rublev, whose last 2 Wimbledons have been 4th round quarterfinal. And here's let me put it this way for you. I love this stat. He has made 6 quarterfinals in a row in slams held outside of Paris.
Yeah, look, a couple of guys you mentioned, Jan-Lennard Struff, he's in my honorable mention. The things he does well are. Well, wait,
first, do you have any of them in your top 10?
I do, but I was gonna save that for the end. This is what we call teasing the bit here. Come on, Gil. I know I didn't go to Newhouse, but it's been 5 years, so I've learned a thing or 2 along the way. I agree with Struff completely. Like, again, you go 7-6 in the 3rd with Sinner, you have our attention. He would have been in the same tier of the conversation last year. He just missed the event due to injury in what was obviously a really tough stretch for him to miss. Yeah, his weapons make sense. He's on the outside looking in, because I need to see it at a slam to believe it. But I agree with you on the honorable mention. If Rublev was playing well at all, he would crack the top 10. He's just not right now. And, I know he won a 1,000 level event during the clay season. That's the only reason he's even a part of the conversation right now, is that he has that result bolstering up everything else on his resume. Has to be on the outside looking in. The other guy I would throw in there, just because in theory, like Tsitsipas's offense makes sense on this surface. And there's a world where he goes 10-3 in breakers through the first 4 rounds and then finds himself in the quarterfinals against a guy who his backhand return just can't do enough against. I refuse to write him off. Like, I know the grass court success has been very few and far between, but I'm still young enough to remember the 2022 season. Not that far ago, Gill Gross. And so I agree with where you're at in the honorable mention conversation. Now, again, the guys I didn't mention, and there are 2 of them, notably, are the 2 guys that speak to our differing views in the philosophy of forming this list. And let's start with the guy number 10 on my list, in Sebastian Korda, who I agree, prior to the start of the grass court season, he didn't have a single signature result to his name. In fact, he didn't have a single top 20 win to his name going into the start of the grass court season. But something has been a little bit different for Sebi Korda this year than years past. And the big difference is he also hasn't taken an injury so far here in 2024. And I'm knocking on wood, of course, as I say that, but he's played 37 matches heading into this Wimbledon. That's the most he's played heading into any Wimbledon at the tour level of his career. He's beating who he's supposed to beat. 22-15 overall doesn't sound like a great record, but there, other than a loss to Gregoire Barret in Bucharest, his first match, I think we're willing to throw that out. Like, a lot of the losses were Medvedev, Sinner, Alcaraz, Fritz's of the world, like players who you would have liked to see him have a better record against, but players who at least weren't bad losses along the way. But now what has he done over the past 2 weeks? He beats Tommy Paul in Den Bosch. Gets a good win over Grigor on road soil as well. Again, Grigor's playing in front of a home crowd. I like that win.
Good
beats
win.
Beats Grigor Dimitrov. Beats Karen Khachanov. Pushes Tommy in that second set from 5-2 down, and how well he was striking the ball. It's what he's done over the last 2 weeks. Again, I've seen him peak. January 2023, Sebastian Korda was one of the 5 best players in the world. Like, he had match point on Djokovic in their final opening week of the season. He beats Medvedev, beats Hurkacz at the Australian Open. For me, the reason it hasn't fallen into place for Korda has been health related. And that gets to part 3 of the argument for him is, what if this is the season he's healthy? What if this is the season where we get to see, okay, how good can Sebi Korda be over an 11th month stretch? I think in that scenario, there's a slam quarterfinal for him in that year. And this just feels like the draw where it's opened up, given his game style, given the confidence, given all of the factors coming in. Is that a fair argument to have him in the top 10?
Yeah, it's a solid argument. I like that he's beefed up the serve compared to where he was about 2 years ago, especially where it was a real softball serve. And we saw, I think he played a 5th set against Khachanov at Wimbledon where there were like 9 breaks in a row. Yeah. It's like, does somebody want to serve? I think he's playing with more emotion. He reminds me of FAA in 2022, where it's like, here's like a kind of an introverted guy who's just kind of come out of his shell. And as a result of coming out of his shell, seems to be playing with more fire and more intensity. And I like that aspect of it. I do not trust his forehand. I feel like it can go totally off the rails at any moment. And I just think the consistency factor there concerns me. It's really the trust level. It's not the peak level, because I love Korda's peak level. The trust level for me is a little too low.
So I forgot what show I was on and that we get to talk tactics. That you nailed it right on the head. Like, what's been so good over these last 2 weeks? Oh my God, is he finding forehands? And when Sebi Korda's at his best, he's aggressive with his footwork. As good as the backhand can be, he wants to get outside of that ball on the outside, take it inside out to open up the patterns, because if you do find a ball on his backhand wing, he could just redirect its line so well. And he made a living doing that against Dimitrov in his victory last week in London. He holds the baseline so well on the return of serve. He is a good volleyer. Like, it's not the thing that you think of because his ground strokes are so flashy, but it's the depth, the drive on every volley. You mentioned the Khachanov match. Like, he's made round 4 here of Wimbledon before. Never a deeper run than that, and we haven't seen it that frequently from him at the majors. But you made the argument. That would be where I'll end. The
Yeah.
upside of everyone on this list, there is a world where, hey, if he plays his best for 4 matches, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. He can find himself in the quarterfinal. And that would be why that argument for him is still a little higher than Tommy, a little higher than Taylor, and maybe here specifically a little higher than Grigor.
Okay, then the other guy you have in your top 10 is Draper,
who I would double down on that argument with, and we can do even more quickly. I just think Jack Draper's game fits so perfectly on this surface. He has a British home crowd. They're desperate to have someone to get behind. Draper feels like a real guy, a real piece as the new British #1 who they could do so with. The other big thing for me about Jack Draper, and it's the sneaky fun part about this season for him, he really hasn't gotten that much better this year. Again, another guy where it's been a byproduct of, hey, he's just been healthy for 5 months consecutively in a way that was an issue for him early in his career. You look at the career splits for him in tour level matches, and for his career, he's 60-42 overall at the tour level. This year, 20-13. Like his hold percentage for his career, 84.7. This year, it's 84.8. His break percentage for his career, 23.7. This year, it's 23.3. This is who Jack Draper is. And I get that the flashy results have come these last 2 weeks, but for me, that's just a byproduct of he finally has an opportunity to play an Alcaraz on an advantageous surface, to push a Tommy Paul. Sneaky, maybe the best rivalry, non-Sinner Alcaraz related of this 2024 season now that they've played 4 times. Like, I just think it's a byproduct of opportunity. It was when, not if, for Jack Draper, and the when might be now. What are your concerns?
I have a little bit. I see where you're coming from, because it's not the first time we've seen Draper play phenomenal tennis.
Yeah.
We saw it in January this year to start the season. We've seen it in the past. He had the U.S. Open run where he was sick as a dog and he was still winning. There's been a lot of flashes in the past. So you're saying this isn't like guy comes out of nowhere, which kind of goes against what I was saying about changing my opinion really quickly. You're also looking at his stats this season that I think are deflated because he's coming off of a bad clay court season.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, I think that there are some real things that have happened with just how he's going about his tennis. Like he's said it himself. I'm done being a grinder. I need to come forward. I need to be imposing on my forehand, not just have this spinny forehand that goes in every time. Like we need to hit it and we need to take some time away. But the awesome thing is he has the skill set to do that. So it's not like, wow, and I always hammer this home. It's not like, wow, what a brilliant idea. Like Wayne Ferreira, genius. He realized that a player can be aggressive. No, it's that he actually had the skills and the makeup to do it effectively, which is a product of his development in the first place. And it seems like, I don't know if it was Ferreira, but someone has gotten in his ear and he has fully bought into the idea that this is a better style to play. So I'm actually making the argument for Draper.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm the guy.
Yeah, I was like, I love this argument. This is great. Yeah. I agree.
No, I'm the guy who has him outside of the top 10. Yeah. So look, we agree on a lot, obviously, here. Yeah. Let me just say one thing on the Wimbledon thing. I think the pressure is potentially a downside. I think fair. That this is the first time he's going through this where it's going to be center court, full brunt of the media and the fan pressure on Draper's shoulders.
Quick 2 points off of that, and we can move on from my list. But again, I have Korda 10, Draper 9. Jack Draper in a recent magazine, Vogue edition, I believe, of Vogue edition of Vogue magazine. That's how you say that. Didn't he say, I actually love the cameras? Like, I think that's somewhat the quote adjusted, but like, okay, you're going to get them in Wimbledon. We'll see how much you love the cameras, my friend.
Which I buy. Like every time I've seen him play in big stadiums, even as a young player, like he played Tsitsipas, I think it was in Canada, center court, one of his first matches against the top player, won the match. I watched him play Felix on Armstrong at the U.S. Open, won the match. So it's not like he hasn't won big matches. He has. I just think this might be a different level for him. We'll have to see. By the way, I asked you right off the top, I said, is there one guy who you really was on the cusp of putting him in the top 10? Of the guys I didn't put, it was Draper who I was teetering on.
Interesting. Yeah. The second point for him would be 15 years from now, if Twitter's still a thing, they'll do, or TikTok or whatever, they'll do the highlight reel of Jack Draper was a problem. And it'll just be 7 forehand ad side return winners he hit during the run in London, where it was just like, dude, all right, we get it. Like, you've got that shot in your bag, because if you hang that high, he's going to capitalize. He has all the skills. He's 9 on my list. I think, again, on my list of players who could make a top 10 debut this year, he would be high on that list. Someone I think will have a big second half.
And for a breakdown of that ad side return, make sure you check out The Point. It is my new series on YouTube where I break down a singular point that's either interesting or important. Okay, guys who I don't have in that I just want to make sure, that we can move on from them, that you don't have them in.
Okay.
I don't have Holger Rune.
Nor do I.
I don't have Talon Griegspor.
I mean, on principle, I have him, but only as a name of a tier. It's the Talon Griegspor tier. He's not in it this year.
Okay, and I don't have FAA.
Yeah, I don't have any of those guys on my list either.
Okay, just wanted to. I think they deserved.
Good shouts. Yeah.
They deserved their names to be uttered on the podcast.
Okay, if we're doing names, if he gets through qualifying, Pericard. Just a name.
Sure.
But since we're doing the names section, carry on.
Okay, let's go to the top 10 section.
Okay.
Number 10, I have Tommy Paul. I've already explained it. Who do you have at 10? I think it might be
Korda.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to number 9 then.
And I have Draper at 9. So it's all
okay. Yeah. My number 9 is Matteo Berrettini.
He's my 8. This is beautiful.
Wow, okay. Very good.
Make the case for us.
So first of all, the knock on Berrettini is there's no matches. Give me the matches. And I would just say to that, well, last year there were no matches, and he beat Zverev at Wimbledon. He beat Dimitrov at Wimbledon. He played a good match against Alcaraz. So this is a guy who often doesn't have matches and still is able to pick up disruptive wins on a regular basis. Meanwhile, when we have seen him this year, he's got 3 finals and 6 events. So I'd say from what we've seen, it's been pretty good. And that's why I have him in. Now, why don't I have him maybe higher than 9? This grass season, given the lack of kind of sample that we've seen from Berrettini, it actually didn't do that much for me. Although he did make the final in Stuttgart, his best win on that run was against Lorenzo Musetti. Then he lost to Giron in the second round in Halle. So that's where I'm at with Berrettini, but I think he's dangerous. Like, I think he is to be taken very seriously.
So Matteo Berrettini, we talked about the ELO ratings. And again, I'm going off the grass court raw ELO ratings, which is give me just your grass court results. How do you stack up compared to the rest of the field? Tommy Paul, who you have 10th on your list, 7th by raw grass court rating. So again, there's a reason we're both high on him. And I would point out again, 8 through 13 on my list. So the Berrettini through Fritz section. This is all the same tier 3 for me. Berrettini's 8 on my list. He's 4th on the grass court raw tennis abstract ELO ratings, and he's 44-11 in his career on grass courts. And look, we could talk about the tactics. You'll remember them very well. He's a 2021 Wimbledon finalist. His serve, his first forehand, obviously amplified on this surface. But tactically, we don't talk enough about how successful his backhand slice is on this surface in particular. He knows if I hit the backhand slice line and it lands short enough, they're popping something up. And the moment that ball gets popped up, he's hitting a forehand. And the moment he hits that forehand, he's in control of the point. He just knows exactly who he is on this surface, and we know that game style works. The other point, and we both were in Phoenix. We got to see him in person. I had the opportunity to interview him, which was a blast. He spoke to the fact that, look, when I am back on court, I am not concerned about my tennis. For me, the concern is just, can I be healthy at any given moment? Because if I'm healthy, I know the things I can do work. And to your point, he has been healthier of late. He made a Phoenix final. He wins Marrakesh. He makes another grass court final as well. Yeah, he lost second match the next week. Who cares? He has looked healthy enough that I trust his tennis enough that I know he's one of the 10 best grass court players in the world. Like, just that's how his game style is when he is healthy. And we saw it, to your point, last year as well, the win over Zverev. He has to be in the top 10 of your list because of that. Now, I agree with every reservation you said. That's why he's 8th and not 4th, which feels like a legitimate, what is the race for number 4 at? That's the most interesting spot. but I think he's eighth, and he rounds out this tier 3 of, look, you're just missing out on, I see a world where you make the final, but if you did, it wouldn't shock me.
I'm right there with you on the tier thing. There seems to be
Yeah.
a little bit of a gap between Berrettini and my number 8, and for you would be Berrettini and your number 7.
Yeah.
Uh,
But your 8 is Dimitrov, right?
my 8 is Dimitrov. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the same tier though for me. Like I
Right.
actually I have Dimitrov one tier below you, but similar sort of like he's right in that mix there as well.
Sure. And yeah, so for Berrettini, backhand weakness is de-emphasized because of the slice. Serve strength is amplified because of the surface. My questions would be, one, if he goes up against an elite returner who actually makes him hit a first ball backhand and neutralizes the serve +1, and two, the focus and consistency required in best of 5 over 2 weeks, the physicality required for that. Just, is he a little bit under seasoned to maintain the highest level for that long a period of time?
I would argue there are only like 3 good returners even on grass courts in the men's game right now. And so, like, I agree. If he runs into one of those 3, he's in trouble. The focus over 5, I completely agree with you. Like, that's why he's 8th for me and not 4th. But if he is at his best and he gets to the quarterfinals, he can beat anyone from there.
All right, so my 8 is Dimitrov. Have we discussed your 8 yet?
Yeah, Berrettini.
Okay, Berrettini's your 8. Let's go to 7.
This is where it gets fun.
It does.
This is,
It does.
I think, and I actually think we're going to have the same 4 names, albeit in a different order.
I agree. I think you're probably right.
And I think when I say that, I mean my tier 2, because I think we have the same top 3 as well. Spoiler. My tier 2 is the guys ranked 4 through 7. And I actually think the rank for the 4th spot, can we concede Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, spoiler alert, in some order are 1, 2, and 3?
We can concede.
Okay, so we won't give that order away right now. I think we're going to have the same 4 guys at 4. So I apologize for circumventing the process. Can we start at 4? Because for me, that's the most interesting position. That's the one where you're saying, okay, it's not one of the 3 guys we know can win the damn thing. Who's next on your list? Because I am fascinated to hear the argument.
Yeah, this is the big question, I think, when we're doing this exercise. So sure, let's go to number 4 right now. I don't think you're going to agree with me. I really don't.
Ooh!
I have Daniil Medvedev as my number 4.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
I get that narrative-wise and trend-wise, it's not the sexy place to go. It's not the guy who people are going to be high on right now. But I would just caution severely into getting down on Daniil Medvedev after a clay season. How silly is that to do? When January looked good, the Australian Open was really positive. There were some good things in March. I am concerned about the serve, like everyone else who follows this stuff really, really carefully is concerned about the serve. But his ace rates were decent in Halle, and he loses to Zhang in a 3rd set tiebreak. Guess what? That's grass court tennis. When you play your first grass event of the year and the margins are shrunk, you can take a tight loss to a player in Zheng Zhizhen, who I also think is pretty darn good. So I am not going to let the rough clay season and the fact that he hasn't won a title in over a year, I'm not going to let that get in the way of the fact that Medvedev's game makes sense on grass. He made the semis of Wimbledon last year, and he is overall the 4th best player in the world right now. Actually, either him or Zverev.
I really have no issues with the argument. He's 6th on the list for me, but still in this tier. And I think inclusion in this tier is just out of respect for who Daniil Medvedev has been. He made the semifinals of Wimbledon last year. Did he have to face a single seed to get there? No. But he still made the semifinals of Wimbledon. He stumbles his way into major quarterfinals. Even, I know he didn't do it this year at Roland Garros, but last year he certainly did that. And, again, this is a guy who 3 out of 5 sets is just disciplined enough to make your life miserable. Now, to your point, on this surface, why has he been better than the experts might predict? It's because he can win free points on serve. This year, that just hasn't been the case. His hold percentage is under 80%. Like, this is a 5% dip. You just don't see those sorts of drastic changes for players, barring some sort of significant injury. And we know there have been some shoulder issues that he's played through all season long. But, again, he's played 74 career matches on grass courts, which is higher than most of the field. That's a significant sample size. He's 51 and 23. He's won 69% of those matches. Again, has had serious runs and serious success on this surface. He's able to keep the backhand so low. Again, he's the best. No, he's the worst good volleyer in the world in the sense that he hits good volleys. It just looks horrible how he does it.
That's talent.
Yeah, exactly. There are enough skills there to make your life uncomfortable. You just have to respect Medvedev. Like, it's a respect pick at this point as much as anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also want to add that his baseline aggression is up this year. I think he's a better baseliner this year than he has been in the past. And you mentioned his hold percentage is down. His break percentage is up, right?
Sure. Yeah, break percentage is right. I mean, he's still top 10 in break percentage. He's, I think, 27.8%. That's down from last year, but above his career average.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
He has the close return position now. It has really hurt him in the past. Like, it hurt him against Hurkacz, right? He's lost to Hurkacz at Wimbledon a couple years back. He's using his super deep return position, getting dragged out wide. Hurkacz is hitting an approach on every +1 shot, and now Medvedev's in a pretty terrible position. We've seen this year he's now comfortable stepping in a little bit, which is really important on the grass. That's just another thing that I like. I want to throw it in there, but
Sure.
I want to know now who your number 4 is.
Well, the thing is, again, the inability to win free points for himself is going to hurt him, Daniil Medvedev, at some point of this event. And that is the issue for me that separates him from the guys who are 4 and 5 on my list, which is why I was trying to get to. Look, your relationship with Hurkacz is the Bradgelina of tennis YouTube sagas. Like, obviously, it's long, detailed. I don't know if you've done the point segment on it, but you have done multiple Monday match analyses on the topic. Given the uncertainty surrounding the Medvedev level, given Sasha Zverev's holding over 90% of the time this year, and I think the litmus test and the benchmark for him should be quarterfinals, and we'll get into him more as he's 5 on my list. I still think I have to have Hurkacz at number 4 overall at cutting into this Wimbledon. And I know Hurkacz can be hit or miss at the majors, but Hurkacz is good over the, he is just one of the top 8 players in the world. And I know he's 10th right now in the points race, but 7th in the rankings over these last 52 weeks, where he's 56 and 22 overall. He's won a Shanghai Masters event, obviously last week, to beat Zverev, to beat Giron, to, I think only be broken once throughout the course of the tournament. And by all people, it was by a Marcos Giron, not a Jannik Sinner. Like, Hurkacz's game just works perfectly on this surface. And again, it's everything we said about Berrettini, but instead of forehand, maybe say backhand, and how he serves and volleys, and how well he moves, and how fluid he can be. And the thing is, look, his forehand is a weakness. There's no doubt about it. Every time Jannik Sinner was pressured in their final, he attacked and said, I'm serving to your forehand, and I get a +1 ball after that. There are maybe 5 people who can execute that game style consistently enough to keep pace with what Hurkacz is going to be doing to you on the other side of the equation, because he is going to hold serve. Again, he's 89.9% on the year, 3rd amongst top 50 players. He serves and volleys. His high forehand as a reset when he gets pressured on that side, it's not the greatest, but it works on this surface. Another one of those guys who knows exactly who he is, who we've seen make a Wimbledon type run before. And again, part 3 of the power rankings for me, big picture. If there was ever going to be an opening for Hurkacz to make a slam final, the way it felt like going into the French for Zverev and Ruud, if there was ever going to be an opening for one of them to get a major title, this was the one you circle. That sort of narrative is on Hubie's shoulders, I would say, heading into this Wimbledon, where it's like, look, Alcaraz and Sinner, they only getting better. Like, the rest of the field only getting more experienced on grass. This is kind of the perfect point for a guy in his late 20s. If you're going to make a moment, make a run, be a Goran Ivanisevic in 2003, or Richard Krejcik from the 90s type moment. Hubie's the guy to do that. That's why I have him at 4 on my list.
I think Goran might have been 99.
Yeah, yeah, 03 felt way too recently. That was like definitely a Federer one. I think I have it up in front of me. Goran was 01. 01. We'll
Oh
split
one,
the
oh
difference.
one. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. You compared Hurkacz to Berrettini.
Uh-oh.
Stylistically, I kind of disagree. I think it's more about the serve. I don't think there's anything, maybe the volleys that I love
Yeah.
Hurkacz at the net, but it's really the fact that Hurkacz is the best server in the world. I don't think it's close. I think any other suggestion is basically wrong at this point. If you think someone serves better, I disagree quite strongly with that. Where I do see him as a Berrettini, circa 2021, especially, or even 22 before before the COVID thing
Yeah.
happened. Uh, the serve should carry him far. I just don't see it with the tier one wins. And I think there are other players who I see as more threatening to top players. Where I look at Hurkacz, who's 1-5 against top 10 players this year. His first win was Zverev in Hala. He has
Mm-hmm.
never beaten Djokovic. He has never beaten Sinner. He has never beaten Alcaraz. I feel good about Hurkacz as well. I have him at number 6. His slam
Okay.
struggles, I think, are behind him. Quarterfinal, fourth round this year. That's super positive. Great effort versus Djokovic in the fourth round of Wimbledon last year. And you might give him a pass for the U.S. Open loss to Jack Draper because he was sick. He had that U.S. Open virus thing that was going around. So that's 4 majors in a row where I feel like Hurkacz was respectable after a long run of best of 5 set disappointments. I feel good about Hurkacz too. By the way, I trust his forehand a lot more this year. I don't think he is letting it beat himself as often.
So you're not Brad Jelena then, you're Ben and Jennifer Lopez. Like that's who you actually are. So it's on again, it's off again. Right now you're in a positive period.
I'm good with Hubie. Hubie and
Yeah,
I
well,
are good right now.
so you nailed it. And this is one of the stats. It's my old teammate Arthur Osga used to always to fire us up, say, guys, look, we can't win the tournament in round 1, but we can lose it. So let's get our act together. And to Hubie Hurkacz's credit, that's where he's been so good this year. Amongst in 2024 against players ranked, first of all, he's 5th in total wins here on the season. But the big thing for Hubie has been how good he's been against opponents ranked outside the top 20. He's 30-4. That's tied for the most wins right there with Casper Ruud on the seasons against non-top 20 opponents. To your point, not only the bad record against top 10, he's 3-9 against that top 20 overall this year. So here's the thing. He's beaten who he's supposed to beat. He's getting to the 4th round. He's getting to the quarters. He's holding seed. Can he get over that next hump? I just do feel that this is the surface where he would be able to do it. And again, right now, if I asked you straight up, Hurkacz versus Medvedev, Wimbledon round of 16, who are you picking? I think I would pick Hurkacz based on what I have seen of late and his track record on the surface. And that's why he's a little higher for me, although again, still in the same tier as Daniil Medvedev.
Yeah, I think that's a bad matchup for Medvedev. I think I might
Yeah,
go with
sure.
Hurkacz there too. But it's a good point. It's a good question to raise. There's a guy above Hurkacz who's also been a bad matchup for Medvedev, that I have. But let's talk about Zverev now.
Wow. Wait, so I think I know your list. Okay, sorry. Carry on. Let's go into
I know.
Zverev.
There's gonna be one.
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
know.
Okay.
There's something coming here that
Okay, I'm
will
ready.
likely ruffle some feathers, but let's cover the Zverev part of it
Okay.
first.
He's 5
Because
on my list, just so you
and
know.
okay, and I have him 7, which
Okay.
feels
Oh,
low. Okay, Zverev second in the race, coming off of a slam final, and he's a tier 1 server. It's like, how in the hell do you not have him higher? And the reason is we have had so many years of Zverev in this exact mold.
mhm.
Like, I don't know how 2024 Zverev is all that different from 2023 Zverev when he was kind of, maybe you could say he was on the a little bit lingering of the injury that happened a year ago at that point. But like over the years, we've had Zverev come off of Roland Garros runs. He's always had this massive first serve. Wimbledon has been by so large a margin his worst slam. It's not close, no quarterfinals. And it's not like the warm-ups have been all that different. Whereas Zverev in his career against top 20 players on grass is 2-5. On clay, that number is 27 and 27. On hard, it's 66 and 62. Look, I know it's a small sample on grass, that 2-5 number, but I think it just goes to show we don't need to just look at Wimbledon numbers. We can look at the entire body of work, and it just hasn't happened for Zverev on grass. And I think the fact that we've seen it, this kind of version and level of Zverev so many times not produce on the surface, it has me down on him compared to some of the other guys who I think, oh, here's something new, fresh, maybe something we haven't seen before on grass, if you know what I mean. Do you know
No,
what I'm getting at?
absolutely. It's an excellent point to make. And again, you look at the numbers of a Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal, they've just skewed the perception of what's elite in this sport because they're like 101-4 at the French Open or 89-7 at Wimbledon, all these different things. For Zverev, first of all, to have over 20 wins at 3 different majors is a really difficult thing to do. He's 25-9 at the Australian Open, 22-8 in New York, 34-9, of course, at the French Open, where he's had his most success, made 4 straight semifinals. He's 13-7 at Wimbledon. Like, that's pretty pedestrian relative to the rest of the Zverev sphere of success. He's never made it past the round of 16 at this event. I do think the Zverev reinvention that has happened, and it is worth noting, like we've talked about the stat before, a guy who has the biggest case of second serve yips in tennis history. Did he address the second serve? No, it was just, I'm now going to make over 70% of my first serves and never miss this shot. And to his credit, it freaking worked. Like, look at the math, look at how it's tilted. He's holding over 90% of the time, number 2 in hold percentage on the season. The piece that goes behind that, it's not just the improved first serve percentage. And as a guy who's watched a lot of Alex Zverev matches over the year, he went from a Taylor Fritz-esque volleyer to a good volleyer. Like, he is a good volleyer now, not a great one. He will still hang too many volleys, particularly on clay, that will give a guy like Alcaraz a second opportunity on a pass. And against elite of the elite, you can't do that. But on grass courts, life gets a little different. On grass courts, you just really have to make the first volley. And your life becomes that much easier. And Alex Zverev makes the first volley now. And that's why he's 5 on my list, because his game style, his physicality, eye test wise, I know he lost to Hurkacz, but there are some backhand lines he can hit that are just going to serve him so well on this surface. I actually think if he doesn't make the quarterfinals this year, it's a massive disappointment because the level of improvements are there for him to now have success.
Totally agree with that. It shouldn't be this bad at Wimbledon. I don't think
100%.
it will. I don't think it will continue to be this bad at Wimbledon. I do think I got to call you out on this. It's not a great time to make a Zverev volleys are pretty good argument. I mean, it was the main culprit in the 5th set at Roland Garros. If there's one shot that let him down,
I agree. But don't you think those volleys would have been more impactful on grass courts than they are on clay? And I know that's like a weird thing to say, but it's just like you don't have as much time to recover. You don't have as much time to change direction. Zverev went from not even making those volleys to now he makes them. And yeah, they're a little shaky, but it's the next step.
You're right. Like, Zverev likes to volley hard and deep. He doesn't love the drop volley as much as others. And if you're going to volley hard and deep, clay is your enemy and grass is your friend. And I agree with that. I think the more important part for Zverev is the serve improvement overall and the forehand down the line, which now is sometimes there. It used to almost never be there. Like 2021, there was a flash where it was there and he won the Olympics with hitting really good forehands down the line. But I think he's been more consistent on the forehand down the line. I also think it makes sense why Zverev hasn't had as much success on grass. The other thing that I would add, other than the baseline passivity as his normal function of baseline play, not being proactive, I think the height of bounce really hurts his backhand. It's the opposite of clay, where he's taking the ball chest high and just hammering these flat backhands like a frozen rope. And on grass, where he's having to kind of go down and get them and lift up on the ball more, it's just not as deadly. And I think even on the forehand, that can affect him a little bit.
I think that's fair. Watching him in Halle, I thought he was turning through his forehand as well as I'd ever seen him do on a grass court. I'm never too concerned about the backhand, but you're right. He bails out and hits slice far more frequently, which you just feel like is a wasted opportunity given the backhand he has. The last Zverev point I'd make is there were moments in each of the first two slams this year where I don't want to say he was the best player, but he was certainly, it felt like the second best player. Like, again, if he closes out that match against Medvedev in the semis of Australia, which he really should have, you would have felt like we have the two best players, the guy who beat Alcaraz and Medvedev and Sinner in that Australian Open final. Obviously, he was up 2-1 on Alcaraz in the Roland Garros final. Like, things are going well for Zverev at the majors this year. He has to be no lower than tier 2. For me, it means putting him at 5 because, again, the Hurkacz skill set makes more sense on grass courts. But I agree with you. The gap of players in tier 2 is not particularly large.
Yeah, and the best of 5 intangibles might be something that even I am a little bit neglectful of when it comes to Zverev in this particular power rankings. I think that's a good point by you that he finds ways to win in best of 5. He's tough in best of 5. But let's move on. My number 5 is actually Alex de Minaur.
I knew it would be. He's my number 7. Make the case.
7th in the race, 5 and 6 this year against top 10 players. So you're seeing both things you want to see: consistency week to week and an ability to actually punch up above your weight, which was missing massively from de Minaur's resume for the first 4 or 5 years of his career, especially if you look at the top 5 and the top 10 records. Meanwhile, he's always been good on grass because of his movement, his flat trajectories. The lower ground stroke speed didn't hurt him quite as much. Now he's got more of a serve. One thing that I've highlighted on Monday Match Analysis is if you look at the average opponent that de Minaur is playing, he's not getting outserved by his average opponent anymore from a speed standpoint. And he's got more ground stroke speed at his disposal, which is going to help him be more offensive on the grass. I still think he moves just exceptionally well from corner to corner. Didn't drop a set to win Hertogenbosch, so not only did he get through, but it was a dominant title. He has an Eastbourne title on his resume. He's got a couple of last four runs at Queens. He made the final last year, you might remember. Now, Wimbledon, the history is not as positive, but I do see some bad draws. He did get Berrettini in the second round last year. He let Christian Garin get to the quarterfinal in 2022, which was not a good loss when the draw actually did open up for him. But then in 2021, he had to face Sebastian Korda in the first round. So I'm looking past the tough Wimbledon results. I'm looking past the fact that if you look at the overall track record over the years, it doesn't look as good big picture as, let's say, as Zverev, and not even close. But I do think that 2024 Alex de Minaur is very different from any other Alex de Minaur that we've seen in the past. And even the past Alex de Minaur got a big boost on grass. It's been his best surface. Now we have improved de Minaur on the surface that's going to help him out.
Yeah, you mentioned the top 10 record. He's also second right now in the 2024 season in top 20 wins. He's got 11. That's second only to Jannik Sinner's 12. He's 11-7 against top 20 opponents. So the wins he's racked up, one of 5 men to have 30-plus wins on the season. It's not as though he's played cupcake competition and is feasting on 250s. No, he's had success in Acapulco. Yeah, the grass court title was a 250, but it's grass courts. So the level of the events are just going to be higher because you only have so many opportunities to play those events. You're right. Like, the Wimbledon win percentage lags behind. I believe he's won 57% of his Wimbledon matches, 8-6 overall, versus a 48-23, 68% win percentage on grass courts overall. This guy's made 5 tour level grass court semifinals or further in his career. You mentioned the serve. That's obviously improved. The thing we never talk about enough, Alex de Minaur is a very, very good volleyer who uses his speed so well to beat you to the spot, play the drop volley comfortably, and just, again, that profile, attacking profile amplified on this surface, certainly. The other big thing for de Minaur, it's the backhand and the continued improvement on that wing. It's just the depth that he hits that shot with. There's just not much you can do off of it. And when he becomes less attackable, you float a forehand, he's going to slap through it now that much more comfortably. He's just The speed, the most impressive part is that with the improved speed, pace has not compromised the speed at all. Like only Djokovic moves as well as this guy on a grass court. And that just speaks to who he is as an athlete. Again, he's gone round of 16 quarterfinals at the first two majors as well. You can't win in the first week, but you certainly can lose the event there. He hasn't done that. He has to be a tier 2 guy. He's earned that sort of status. He's 7th for me, but I get the case for him being at 5 completely.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's go to our top 3, which we've already discussed is going to be some combination of Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. Let's start with number 3, and then we'll work our way up. And I am slotting in Djokovic here. 2020. Okay.
Yeah.
You have him too at 3.
I do. Make the case.
No, you go first.
Well, here's just the stat of why he can't be lower than 3. Because I seriously considered putting him in tier 2. But here's why he can't be. He's made 5 consecutive Wimbledon finals, 2018 through 2023. Obviously, they didn't play the event in 2020, but 5 consecutive finals at Wimbledon. That is the most consecutive finals he has made at any major event in his career. More than Australia, more than New York, obviously more than what he's done in Paris as well. 5 straight Wimbledon finals. We have spent all episode talking about the uncertainty quantitatively surrounding all of these players coming into this event. You know who Novak Djokovic is on a grass court, a guy who's a 7-time Wimbledon champion. And so obviously you have health concerns. Obviously, this has been the worst season of Djokovic's career since he became Novak freaking Djokovic. It's Wimbledon. Like, it's still Wimbledon. That's the argument for him. I don't have a good tennis case because the serve has fallen off this year. That's been the difference. But it's Wimbledon, Gill. Like, I can't put him outside of tier 1.
Yeah, exactly. It got to a point where with Novak at Wimbledon, especially like 2021 through 2023, where you and I were having these conversations and it was like, you can't even really pick anybody else. There's not even really like, there's not even a secondary option.
Oh, but Cilic made the semis at Roland Garros. So why can't he win the 2022 Wimbledon? It was like, that's where we were contorting ourselves to.
Right. People were like, well, Berrettini can win Wimbledon. And it's like, well, not if he plays Djokovic. He can't.
Yeah, exactly. Kyrgios, like, no.
Yeah.
100%.
Look, the skill set when it comes to returning, pace absorption, redirecting, depth, movement, balance, so superior on the surface. What I like also is that if his fitness is subpar based on the preparation or his age and just what it's looked like this year, I'm not really as concerned on the grass. Like, he needs to play kind of bang bang tennis and win, dominate those 0 through 4 rally length statistics because he's serving better and returning better and never missing any +1s. That's how he needs to win at Wimbledon. That's what he's done over the years. And if he's not like a fitness monster, that doesn't concern me. Where when it comes to Roland Garros, it did concern me. And I do think a guy like Casper Ruud could have dragged him in to those physical trenches. That's not even a concern for me, which makes me really high on Novak. Now, obviously, I think we should address why we don't have him at number 1 or number 2. And it's like, in 2024, he hasn't made a final. His only semi is a 250, and we still don't know that he's even going to play the event.
Yeah, that's the exact case for Novak Djokovic. And it is also worth noting, as he's entered, I call it Djokovic 4.0, which is the post-COVID era, 2021 onwards, Novak Djokovic, is the pinpoint accuracy with the +1 forehand, how devastating he is now when his serve is in rhythm and when he is able to play comfortable attacking tennis. And again, it's a skill set that feels most amplified on this surface. And it's a skill set he'll have to turn to, because you nailed the point exactly. He does not want to be bailing out in these long, physical, 8+ shot rallies. And certainly this is a surface that you can make things less physical, but also it's slippery surface. Like you just don't want to be older and creakier. And one slip is that much more detrimental to how you're feeling in a year where Djokovic, and I say this 2024 health-wise specifically, has been a little fragile. Like there have just been injuries that have picked up throughout the course of the year. Now, again, I started this segment by saying 5 straight Wimbledon finals. A guy who does that, he's tier 1. It's the same way almost you had to be deferential to prime Rafa, where it's just like, well, look, pencil this guy in. He's making the final. He's probably winning the damn thing. The other piece we haven't talked about is, like, for one of the lone times in Djokovic's history, he suffered an embarrassment. And I don't mean that in a literal sense, but Alcaraz beat him on his house, like in his house, on his court, in 5 sets at Wimbledon. And we saw last year what that meant for Djokovic heading into Cincinnati and what that meant for him heading into the U.S. Open. And now we've had a Djokovic who's had a month off to hopefully get healthy, but prepare and stew on that at an event that obviously he has talked about what it means to him historically. Like, I'm going to swear, fuck no, I'm not writing off Novak Djokovic. Like, you'd be crazy to.
Yeah, I mean, Wimbledon last year in the Djokovic world feels like a long time ago. A lot has gone down. I feel like the mentality and the mindset and the situation is very different. But no, I don't mind the overall point. I would also add that Roland Garros, and I've said this many times, it's kind of a positive for me. Not positive that he got injured, but the fact that we saw the
100%,
fire and the fury
100%.
come back, I think was good to see. If
he turned into
flat,
he turned into Novak Djokovic for the first time. I apologize for interrupting you, but in those comeback victories, it was like, oh, you think you're beating me? Like, I don't need a knee to beat you. I can do it on one. And like, that's Novak Djokovic.
Yeah. If he was emotionally flat again at Roland Garros, like I had seen him kind of for the remainder of the year, I'd feel a lot differently. I'd be like, I just don't know how bad he wants it. Like that would be what, but he showed me he still wants it. He's still ready to battle.
The
real
last
quick
piece, Paris on the horizon. He is going to peak at the Olympics. This is where that process starts. So it's just the last piece I would mention in all of it.
I like that point. Do you think he's going to play? And what do you make of, I think we should address this. What do you make of the confusion online about how it's possible that Novak Djokovic would be able to have meniscus surgery and be ready to play Wimbledon in a basically a 3-week recovery window?
I was gluten-free before that was a thing. Like, he makes the superhuman happen. I mean, it depends what sort of meniscus. Like, there have been players in the NBA who have their knees drained and then play 2 nights later. Like, medicine's cool. We could do shit now. Like, I don't know how else to say it. It means that I don't like to speculate on the medical stuff. I'll just say, no, it doesn't shock me because medicine is really cool and we should believe in it.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor Fritz did it, a couple of years ago.
That's the great example. Excellent example.
He did the same thing. So
wheelchaired off the court and played Wimbledon like a week later.
Yeah, with the meniscus. And
crazy. Yeah, such a good call by you.
Crazy, but at the same time, I feel like we need to find a middle ground between being like, these guys' knees are unbelievable marvels of modern science, and also like, this must be a fake surgery. Can we find a middle ground where it's like, maybe meniscus surgery is just not a huge deal? Like maybe the recovery is quick. Some surgeries have long recoveries. Some surgeries have short recoveries. And by the way, for meniscus surgery, there is a decision to be made by the surgeon if you want to repair it or if you want to just take it out. And I know from my research, hang in there, Gruskin.
Yeah. I know knee injuries get me. No, keep going, please.
But I know for a fact that if the decision is to just take it out and not to repair it, the recovery is reduced drastically. I don't know what it was for Novak. I know Taylor said publicly that they just took it out. But like, let's just get to a spot where we can just accept that meniscus surgery has a quick recovery. I think that's the best place to land.
I think it's very well said.
Who do you have at number 2?
It pains me to say this because of our lifelong rivalry of Sinner Alcaraz and where we've painted ourselves position-wise and how my stock portfolio was just crushing yours up until French Open happened. Once upon a time, you came on a show called the Mini Break Podcast Feed. I want to say it was summer of either 2022 or 2021. And you said, I actually think Carlos Alcaraz, this is back when you were willing to be adventurous. You go, I actually think Carlos Alcaraz's best surface is going to be grass courts. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, this guy was built in a clay court factory. And you're like, no, Alex, I think how aggressive he is, I think it's going to work best on grass courts. And 2 years, 3 years later, I couldn't agree with that take more. I've been giving you credit over the course of the past month, so I have to have Alcaraz at 2, and by process of elimination, that Alcaraz at 1, and by process of elimination, that means I have to have Jannik Sinner at 2. And look, I don't feel great about it coming off of a hollow where Jannik Sinner, I think, faced 9 total break points on his way to the title. A Jannik Sinner who was held over 93% of the time for 5.5 months, almost 6 months now, and 40 matches of ATP Tour play. A Jannik Sinner who, I know you tweeted about it today, but we've been talking about it now for a month on the Mini Break podcast in our 3 to 5 year prime quest. He's winning 90% of his matches through 6 months of play over a 12-month period as well. I think he's 70-8, or maybe that's Swiatek over that stretch of time. But like, this is what world number 1 tennis looks like. And now he gets his first grass court title. And by the way, the last 2 years, 2022, quarterfinals up 2 sets to love on Djokovic. Yeah, he loses that match in 5, but quarterfinals Wimbledon. Last year, yeah, he loses in straights to Djokovic, but semifinals of Wimbledon as well. His +1 tennis isn't serve and volley, but with how much Jannik Sinner pace he plays with, he can just blitz you with weight of shot from the start. And on this surface, you just never have a chance to recover in the rally. And the aggressiveness with which he plays, Jannik Sinner can win the damn thing. I just think, again, I'll just stop there before I get to why I have Alcaraz above him. But okay, Jannik Sinner is thoroughly deserving of tier 1 status. And if you had him at 1, I wouldn't knock you.
I also have him at 2.
I like it. Okay, why?
Yeah, the why is going to be more about Carlos Alcaraz. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is, because
sure,
I can give you some of the Sinner stats that I've been enjoying.
Rain it. I lather in them every night before I go to bed, so hit me with it.
He hasn't lost a match before a semifinal since Zverev at the U.S. Open.
That's I was looking through. Do you know Steffi Graf from 88 to 1991, or 87 to 1990, excuse me? She made the quarterfinals or further in every event that she played, 48 for 48. So I'm just saying, like, what Sinner's doing is crazy, but yeah, Steffi Graf did it for 4 years. But like, to do it for 6 months is nuts.
Yeah. I look at his portfolio. You have titles: Australian Open, Rotterdam, Miami, Halle. You have losses: Indian Wells, Roland Garros, Monte Carlo. There's like a clear court speed thing going on there. Sure. He's lost on 3 in slow conditions 3 times. His titles, Rotterdam, I don't think is fast, but it's very low bouncing and very offensive centric.
Indoors.
Yeah. So I just think that's worth looking at. It's like, okay, this has been the best play, not only the best player in general, but especially the best player if you put him in quick conditions. I also really like the Halle run. Like, I like who he played in the Halle run. And on paper, it's not the sexiest run, but Griekspoor, Marozsan, Struff, Zhang is like, any hipster knows that that's a good run. You know what I mean?
100%.
And then, of course, Hurkacz, who we both regard highly in the final. And you were right to point out, like, the Wimbledon losses recently, they're to Djokovic. So that's obviously positive as well. I got nothing negative to say, but I have Alcaraz above him.
Can I just put a final point on that Sinner argument? Because the other thing about the Halle run that was most impressive is how he continued to improve throughout the course of the week. I thought the spots he hit on serve got a little more refined. He kind of started going, let me just attack these corners more so I can open up an easy lane for my +1, because I'm going to hit that +1 to that spot every single time. Now, obviously, for Hurkacz, serving out wide on the deuce side was because of the forehand he possessed, but early in the week, he was losing tie breaks. By the end of the week, he's beaten Hurkacz 6-6. It's the movement he shows on this surface as well. I thought 17-year-old Jannik Sinner was going to be too stiff, despite how well he connected with the ball. I just didn't know he was going to turn into this sort of athlete. That he is now fluid in corners is why the margin between he and Alcaraz 1-2 is as thin as it is, right? Because that's the piece I feel like he just hasn't had that has blossomed so thoroughly this year.
We agree on that. And
Yeah.
on grass specifically, he has the ability to slide and recover quick, and his balance is unbelievable.
Crazy.
And his agility is good enough to keep his center of gravity low in kind of emergency situations, which is a pretty unique ability that it looks very Djokovic-like. I mean, the skiers, the skier's gonna ski, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's the depth on the return as well. It's at your feet. Now you've popped something up. Now he crushes you.
Yeah, he actually thrives in that really quick pace kind of environment where he's not offering up a lot of time. Maybe he's not getting a lot of time, but the faster the pace of the rally is, the better it is for him, because he's quite a compact player despite unloading with with the power, and also the forehand backswing being somewhat big. He still thrives in those situations.
Also,
All right,
girlfriend now. Like we haven't talked about this enough. This one deserves, sorry, I know we're long here you knew you were having me. But it's crazy. Like in his trophy ceremony, he goes, well, I want to give a shout out to my girlfriend who had 5 match points today, but didn't win. I'd be like, brother, leave that detail out. You could have just said she made the final today and stopped there. But like, I'm saying happy life, happy tennis game. And so like, clearly if that was top of his mind, crazy thing to say, but worth noting, he's in a happy place mentally as well. Like if you went up and you're like, Jenna, I get it. Like you had a great interview with, my girlfriend, Jenna, just interviewed the Arizona Wildcats. Didn't get any of the names pronounced correctly, but she was really great on the sideline. Like she'd be like, Gill, step into my office.
she would. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
totally.
anyways, I rest my case.
Yeah. It's spot on analysis. Some of your best of the show. Look, with Alcaraz, for me, the reason he's number one, it's last year's grass run, plus the recent confidence boost of winning Roland Garros. And I don't think you can look past those two things in combination. Let me take a second to remember what last year looked like, because it's one thing winning Queens and Wimbledon. It's another thing getting terrible draws at both events where he beats Dimitrov, Korda, Minaur, Jari, Berrettini, Rune, Medvedev, Djokovic. So I think that's 8 names who I think really stood out on his Queens Wimbledon double last year. What is that? 7 names that we have in our top 10 who Alcaraz had to beat. It's an unbelievable run. That, along with the fact that he's kind of a confidence player, he's coming off of another major title. And can we also say that there's a slam factor with Alcaraz, that he gets a little bit of a boost in best of 5. His win percentage at majors is 84%. At regular ATP events, it's 77%. That's a significant difference there. And he's turning into a bona fide slam performer.
Here's the best part. His grass court record for his career, it's only 20 matches, but he's 17-3. He has wins over Djokovic, Medvedev, Rune, Jari, Minaur, Korda, Dimitrov, Struff, like all guys you wouldn't exactly want to play. A seeded Oscar-Otta, which means that was a good Oscar-Otta at that time. That's a good grass court win for him. The best part is who his 3 losses are to. He lost to Medvedev 2021. He lost to Sinner 2022. And he lost to a very much informed Jack Draper, who was already in my power rankings earlier this year. Like, that's a sick resume. I know that's astute analysis, but that is just the resume you would want in a year where resumes are still uncertain. And it gets back to what you said in 2021. His attacking tennis just works best on this surface. He blitzes you. He can still move in the way, again, only he, Djokovic, and Minaur really can on this surface. How well his forehand explodes through the court. He just has to make the drop shot. It doesn't even have to be perfect, and it's successful on this surface. He can serve and volley well. We've seen continued improvement on his serve. I've said this has been my going take, and this will be the last take I throw at you if you agree. I'm curious if you agree or disagree. I think Sinner, day in, day out, is the best player in the world right now. I think we still have to acknowledge upside is Carlos Alcaraz. His best is the best we have in tennis right now, with Djokovic being this version of himself. And so that's why when I'm making a power rankings, if we're getting the best version of everyone, Alcaraz has to be number one because his best is still the best.
The way I put it during Roland Garros, because I do agree with you,
Yeah.
I said Sinner has 10% more reliability. Alcaraz has 10% more magic.
Chutzpah.
And not chutzpah.
It is
I know,
chutzpah.
it's not about chutzpah, because you can have as much chutzpah in the world is not going to teach you that offensive arsenal.
It's
okay.
fair.
And I know you're just proud of yourself that word got in the pod 6 times. Okay. But besides that, I think the fact that Alcaraz can go up against Novak Djokovic, who makes what, like 2-3 unforced errors in a 5th set, and Alcaraz still wins the set because he's just that spectacular. That's what it's all about with Carlitos. All right, so we agree on the top 3. We also agree on the tiers, which
That's
is
weird. I don't like that. In a year, in an event where we started talking about how subjective things are, it's not great if your opinions line up, right? Or is that speak to where we are?
It might spell disaster. We're just going to have to see. Gruskin, thanks for coming on.
You're the best. Thanks for having me.